My home office has cables everywhere. I don't claim to have done a good job in keeping them tidy, but at least my desk is reasonably clear. The cables themselves don't look like much, but they enable everything else to work together. What use is a webcam if it's not connected to anything? Or a microphone? Or a monitor? Some of my gadgets can work, at least for a time, without being plugged into anything, but everything is more useful when it's connected to something else. I'm a software engineer, and in computing we've recognised the value of relationships for a very long time. A huge proportion of the world's information is stored in relational databases. A relational database links pieces of information together. For example, a street address isn't very useful on its own, but when it's linked to information about a person, which might then be linked to an online shopping order, that's when things start to become interconnected. In this respect, I think computing has accidentally revealed a glimpse of God. God existed before all things, so clearly God can exist without relating to anything else. But God chose not to leave things that way. I was struck by this quote from Thomas Finger in the first chapter of Saying Yes to Life. God was the only reality there was. Creation could only happen, therefore, if God opened up a space within herself, as it were, where this could occur. But in doing so, God would limit and humble God's self, allowing creatures to exist in a free space within her. If we agree with this, there are some profound implications. I'll only consider two of them now, but you may wish to roll that quote around in your brain a bit more later. Firstly, if we exist in a free space within God, we are created in relationship with God. We are not independent from God. Our relationship with God is a core part of who we are and how we exist. Secondly, that act of creation was self-giving. I'm reminded of the God in Love Unites Us report that we've discussed within the circuit and that District Synod considered on March the 20th. The report offers these principles of good relating. All significant relationships should be built on self-giving love, commitment, fidelity, loyalty, honest mutual respect, equality, and the desire for the mutual flourishing of the people involved. It is through that self-giving, rather than through self-seeking, that the self flourishes and begins to experience life in all its fullness. The report goes on to note that it needs to be recognised that the Universal Church's historic emphasis on self-sacrifice has often been misunderstood and misused in a way that is destructive of the well-being of the ones abused, often women. I agree and urge caution, while still affirming the main points highlighted by the report. That self-giving aspect of good relating is repeated throughout the Bible and emphasised by Jesus in instructions such as love your neighbour as yourself, love one another as I have loved you, and love your enemy. Of course, the ultimate example is the sacrifice of Jesus on the cross. Reflecting on the passage from Mark's Gospel, and bearing in mind our Lent theme of environmental awareness, I'm struck by darkness falling across the land, as if this is a sign of the relationship Jesus has with the whole of creation, that the sky itself grieves his death. Almost every verse within this passage speaks of some form of relationship, whether it's between humans and Jesus, between humans and God in Trinity, or between God the Son and God the Creator. I would love to linger on each verse and consider its implications further, but I don't wish to outstay my welcome in your place of worship. Instead, perhaps you'll join me in the group discussion next Wednesday evening, where we can dwell within the Word together. We relate to Jesus in praise, adoration, and recognition on Palm Sunday. We relate to Jesus in his sacrifice on Good Friday, a sacrifice to restore right relations between ourselves and God. On Easter Day, we celebrate the relationship of life between Jesus and creation, that God's love has power over death. But in that trilogy of events, we can't skip from Palm Sunday to Easter Day. We can't choose to ignore the sacrificial aspect, only keeping the bits which are more comfortable. That's the impression that Ruth Valerio's book has increasingly left with me, that over the centuries, the relationship between humankind and nature has been one of pick and choose. We've made it one way, taking what we want from creation without giving back, and without considering the impact our actions have on other people. We must consider that our relationship with God includes our relationship with God's creation, that a right relationship with God must involve a right relationship with the planet. This week's creation passage focuses on animals and people. What does a self-giving relationship with the animals in the world look like? We might consider wild animals, livestock, and domestic animals separately. What acts of self-giving or self-denial would slow and eventually stop the pace of species extinction? For those of us who still accept meat in our diet, myself included by the way, what can we do to improve the welfare of those animals and reduce the impact of livestock agriculture on climate change? What can we do to better take care of domestic animals? This last aspect is probably the one where I find a self-giving relationship easiest to think about. I have 3 cats, and I can confirm that cats do not have owners. They have staff. Our relationships with other people include more than just those we see in person, or even those we may provide donations for via charities. In our deeply interconnected world, the subject of each day of creation is impacted by our everyday decisions. What we eat and drink, how we consume energy, what we purchase and from where, how we dispose of waste, and more. I'm hoping that the focus we've maintained on the environment this Lent will help every one of us to be more aware of our impact as individuals and communities, and how this isn't just a humanitarian concern. It should be core to our faith life rather than a nice to have that we never get round to addressing. That's a source of hope as well as challenge, however. Once we acknowledge that our environmental relationship is part of our relationship with God, we can ask in confidence for the help of the Spirit in setting it right. We know that it will take sacrifice, that it will be hard, but we know that God is with us in our struggles and knows what it means to give of oneself. Let us look on God's creation and agree it is very good and worth honouring. Let us look on God's self-giving relationship with us and use it as a model for our lives. Let us look on one another as bearing the image of God and work together for life in all its fullness, in every place and every form. Amen.